soon thousands were coming every year to this world-renowned health institution, whose name Dr. Kellogg changed to the Battle Creek Sanitarium. The health revolution had arrived and achieved a good start. But the spiritual needs of God's people were never ignored. The idea of holding annual camp meetings was revived in 1868. The first Seventhday Adventist camp meeting was held in Michigan. As many as 2,000 people attended these revival and evangelistic meetings. The idea caught on, and soon camp meetings were being held all over the United States. The Lord was leading His people step by step towards wholeness. They were ready for the next big step in having the image of the Creator restored in their lives. That step was education, and it began with stomach trouble. In 1868, Mr. Goodloe Bell, a teacher suffering from stomach trouble, began a school for Adventist children in Battle Creek. But the going was tough. Most Adventists at that time did not understand the need for a school operated by their church. But Bell did not give up, and by 1872, the General Conference Committee voted to sponsor Bell's school as the first official Seventhday Adventist school. But Goodloe Bell, he received a lot of opposition. And you know why he received this opposition? Because he didn't have a PhD. Because he wasn't a professor. Because he didn't study at the great universities. People said, how can this man teach our children? Then in 1872, Ellen White received special instruction from the Lord concerning the education Seventh-day Adventist young people should receive. The words were dramatic. Because time is short, we should be in earnest and work zealously to give the young that education which is consistent with our faith. Can our young people get this education from the schools of Babylon and the world that's consistent with our faith? The greatest care should be taken in the education of youth to so vary the manner of instruction as to call forth the high and noble powers of the mind. True education is the harmonious development of the physical, the mental, and the spiritual powers. It prepares the student for the joy of service in this world and for the higher joy of wider service in the world to come. You see, the schools of Babylon and the philosophy is not about being useful for society. It's about being useful to yourself, about getting degrees, getting an education that will further your career. But the schools of the Adventist Church was to prepare men and women to prepare for Christ's coming, for active labor, to be faithful missionaries, to be self-supporting. This was the purpose for our education. The Adventist people responded to the call of the Lord. They purchased approximately 15 acres of land in Battle Creek. The first Seventh-day Adventist college was dedicated on that land in January 1875. You know, when the brethren bought this college and this land, Ellen White cried. She said this was not the place to buy the college. She gave them special instruction where to buy the land, how much land to get, where to get it. And they took her counsel and dissected it, and they said, well, we'll just take the bits we like. And then we got this place. And look, didn't we follow the counsel of the Lord? And she wept when they bought it. But then she said, alright, you've done it now, let's make the best of a bad situation. The Adventist work had begun in the East, but by the 1870s it was moving westward. So, just coming back to this education, what were the issues? There was a conflict between classical and practical education. Classical was what was being taught in the schools, history, mathematics, Latin, the classical type studies, versus practical. Some of the issues were revolving around degrees of learning. Brother Bell did not have a degree. He didn't have a professorship. And the people thought that we needed someone who had a professorship to run the school. So instead of making Goodloe Bell the head of the school, they brought in people that had a PhD. Goodloe Bell was trained at Oberlin College. This was a Protestant college, and this college basically taught very much the principles that Ellen White was dealing with about a practical, useful education. But it was not recognized. The degree from this college was not recognized by the world. Then they brought this man called Brother Brownsberger. He had a PhD, and all he knew was classical. So he was teaching one thing, and Sister White was teaching another thing, and it was not in harmony. So eventually Brother Brownsberger resigned. But instead of putting Goodloe Bell back in charge, they got this guy, Brother McClure, another PhD, and there was civil war at the college. And eventually Goodloe Bell was pushed out. It almost caused a split in the church. By the way, Battle Creek School was moved. The school was moved at the urging of Ellen White by brothers Percy McGann and Edward Sutherland. Because the original plan for Battle Creek had gone off the rails, Ellen White insisted, move the college and start again. But the problem was that the people that were moving with it, they still had this idea of the PhD, the degrees, the classical types of learning. So Percy McGann and Edward Sutherland, they were getting persecution as well. Just a little bit about Percy McGann and Edward Sutherland. They founded the world-famous Madison College. This college was set up to help the Southern work and also to be a blueprint school. It was also the only institution that Ellen White was a board member. All the different institutions, she did not become a board member. It was the only one, and it was the only institution that was not owned by the conference. And so she added support and weight to it by joining the institution. It was persecuted by the conference. They didn't like the idea of this school taking conference money, taking donations, and the biggest person that did not like the school was Elder Daniels. This school in the 1940s was featured in Reader's Digest. They were so impressed with this school that it was a major article that you could go into this school with no money, get a world-class education, come out with a skill and a trade, and actually leave the college with some money in your pocket. Eventually, they had this idea that the school should be accredited. Once all the Adventist schools went into accreditation, the school system basically collapsed. Because as soon as you try and accredit something, the world then takes place and starts dictating what and what cannot be done. And eventually, to keep up with the pace, Madison College became accredited, and as a result, it went into debt and it crumbled. The church eventually bought the institution and basically sold off all the property, and the sanitarium was eventually basically handed over to the Catholic Church to run. So it was a very sad story from what was the ideal blueprint school, and it just crumbled into the dust. So the Advent message, it was to go to everywhere. So pioneers went all over the country. Missionaries were sent to California via the long and dangerous trip by ship from New York to the Isle of Panama. Crossing the isthmus by train, they then resailed north to San Francisco. Two of the first were elders John Loughborough and Daniel Bordeaux. They raised up 5 Seventhday Adventist churches in California, and it was because of the work of these two men was how A.T. Jones became a Seventh-day Adventist. In 1872, James and Ellen White also came to the Pacific coast, traveling across the vast country in the new railroad. James White, always looking into the future with pioneer eyes, felt the church needed an evangelistic paper on the Pacific coast. And on April 1st, 1874, Ellen White was shown in vision that we would have a paper published on the West Coast. She also saw that we would have a publishing house and a sanitarium there. This at a time when there were only 400 Adventist believers in the Rocky Mountain area. By that summer in 1874, James White could wait no longer for the vision to be fulfilled. He started publishing what he called the religious weekly newspaper, and he called it the